As usual, this will be recorded and published to the public on YouTube channel. So if you do not like your image being used, then please turn off your camera and ask to speak off record at any time you do not want to say your say to be part of the videotape. And then we'll cut it out during editing. Thank you. I'll leave it up to Jeannie now.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you again, to be together here to study our loving and beautiful blue book and its teachings. Today we have the participation of our friend Gaetan, to whom I am very grateful for his willingness to serve. Thank you, Gaetan. You have the word.
Okay, maybe we should start with a short prayer before we go on with this session, and then we can proceed. So if you want to join me in that prayer, I want to thank the Father to give us this opportunity with this technology to meet together from different places in the world where this many years ago was not possible. To give us the opportunity of loving each other, of knowing of each other, of sharing with each other our own experience in finding Him and sharing Him with the world around us. Bless us, Father. Give us also the knowledge and the wisdom to share your teaching with those that need it. Give us strength in all the hardship and all the challenge that we meet through this life, so that we can live your will and be better human being by passing around and doing good to others. May your love transform us, and may we transform others through our own example of who Jesus was. Amen. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, we started a session that we never completely finished because of lack of time. And a lot of people shared their own experience with the teachings and how they were going about to teach what they knew. So in an effort to complete this session, Jeannie, I had offered Jeannie last week that I should continue, but she had already prepared a workshop. So she asked me if this week I would do the last part of that session that was not completed, and I've added a few things to that session. So I don't know if you all remember, I don't know if some of you were not there during that last session. Maybe John Simonich was not there. But I'm going to share with you that paper that I shared before. Second. Here it is. Okay. This is the instruction for teachers and believers that this first session was about, well, the second session was about. And we're going to keep on doing this, working on this paper. So I'm not going to read this paper again, but I've had excerpts, quotes from this paper that I'm going to show you right now. So this is going to be third session, and this is where we were at the last time. If you remember the last time that we read through, we went about the personality of man. Remember when never should the righteous cause be promoted by force. And I guess we could discuss those issues because we didn't go through very well through those sections. So always respect the personality of man. Never should righteous cause be promoted by force. Spiritual victory can be won only by spiritual power. We did talk a little bit about spiritual power, what it is exactly. And Jesus referred to this a few times with his apostle when he talked about the Gentile, that they would, always defend their rights by their own force. So why not use spiritual force? And this, for me, was a new thing. What is it? What is he exactly was talking about using spiritual force in proclaiming the kingdom? Are we gonna, use argument or be righteous about it? And there it is. Never should the righteous cause be promoted by force. A spiritual victory can only be won by spiritual power. So what did Jesus mean by spiritual power? And the second thing is make your appeal directly to the divine spirit that dwells within bands of mind. We did talk about this also, and we haven't, put this made some thinking about, did Jesus knew exactly what was in the mind of others? Did he use his divine mind to know what others knew? Was he in contact with their indwelling adjuster? We did talk about that. And how do we make direct appeal to divine spirit that dwell in the mind of man? So, and at last it is the purpose of this gospel to restore self-respect to those who have lost it and restrain in it those who have it. And why is self-respect so important in acquiring our higher spiritual value? And we talk a bit about that also, because for me it was important. Why does that mean that people that have lost self-respect are limited in their spiritual acquisition or progress? And why is it so important? We did talk about this, and the answers that were given were quite enlightening. And how do we restore self-respect in those who have lost it? We also talked about it a few, and this is where we left off. So I don't know if any one of you want to share anything about those that you felt that you want to share something about those experiences that you might have with those quotes, and you want to enlighten us about how do you see those things in your life. And I would urge you to use the experience that you had in your life more than use intellectual comprehension of it. Nothing is better than to share an experience to make a point, because then it has more value, more living, it's more palatable to me anyway. So anyone who wants to share anything about those before we go on to the third session? This is the stuff that we already covered, but you might have thought of something afterwards. So if anyone wants to share something, say so now, and then, or else we're going to pass on to the third. Yes, Bob.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I owned an executive recruiting business many years ago, and at the same time I served as assistant state director for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. And part of my duties was to travel around in the various 77 counties and make public talks and show films to various social groups like Lions Club, Olympic, that sort of thing. And in doing so, I had a little folding card table where I put 20 books on it. And I had those books, I had various public domain publications about various people's experience with UFOs or ETs or something. And I used those books as a reference. I would tell the audience about what I knew, but I'd say, don't take my word for it. I'd pick up this book. I said, check this book out. And you know what book I included? Something that told you about transporters. You know what that was? The Urantia Book. And it, paper 49 tells you about life on other planets. And I used that in my lectures. I'd hold that book up just like everything else. And afterward, I would have people come up and talk to me, what I call holdbackers. They would hold back waiting for other people to leave because they wanted to talk to me in private. And many, many, many times I had people come up and say they'd heard about that book, but they'd not read it. Where can I get it? And I'd help them get it. Now, I always tell people when I talk to them about Urantia Book, look, I don't tell anybody else this, but I will you. A little deceiving, perhaps. But if you have questions on this book, when you read it on the line or on the paper, you can call me 24/7. The only time I won't answer, I'll be in the shower or sleeping. But you call me. You got my number. I'll be glad to talk to you. And you know, I was surprised how many people would call me, sometimes late at night, and ask me questions. Now, I could handle just about any question they had in the book except on the foreword. That and the Supreme ate my lunch. But I handled most of them, and I wound up being a teacher. I found the best way to find out how to teach a person is to see what their life is about and what they're interested in. There's 360 degrees of approach you can go to the Urantia Book with a person. If you get the one thing that they're interested in, there's something in that book you can tell. And I would tell the people, look at the index or go to the Truth Book. You can get a copy there or the Foundation. Look at the index. 196 entries of different papers. And if you'll print off a copy where you can write on it and look at them, and you see something that really interests you, put a plus. If you see something that doesn't really faze you one way or the other, put a 0. If you see something you don't like, I don't believe that, put a minus. And then go back and read all the papers that are plus. That got the book introduced to them in the way that they had an interest. And I would constantly get questions called to me, and they'd have to remind me where I met them, etc. But it works. Teaching the Urantia Book is a real challenge. And once in a while, this is the Bible Belt in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You come across to fundamentalists, you have a real hard time. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Teaching is fun.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. So maybe others have had similar experience. Yes, Ed? You're mute, Ed.
Back to your original question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. How do we restore self-respect to those who have lost it and restrain it in those who haven't? I've talked about this before. I don't know whether it's to this class or not, but it's simply this. When I'm talking to an individual and he's a down and outer or she's a down and outer or whatever the problem is, I try to explain to them how important they are. That when they're communicating with God, our Father, that you alone at that very point are the most important thing in all creation. And for them to remember this is really important. When you're praying to God, it isn't like you're just throwing out there everything. You're having a personal communion with the first source and center. And He's going to listen to you. Now that's part one of it. And now for the people who have lost it and to restrain it in those who have it, you have to continue praying. You can't go on and, okay, everything looks pretty good for this or that and everything else, and then you just go on to something else. I think you have to have this personal communication with our Father. And this is one of my conversations, and these conversations are a lot longer than what I'm saying to you right now. But that is a real door opening, and people really, really understand that they are that important. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has idea about how to restore self-respect in people? Yes, Bob?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll make this real quick. I found if you can figure out where the person is in his belief system somewhat, particularly if he's got a history of the Bible, I explained to them, hey, you have a great, great responsibility. you know you have the Spirit of God within you. And they'll say, yeah, so I heard. Well, that Spirit of God is going with you, riding along to kind of help you. And its goal is to eventually the two of you agree on everything and blend together. And then you get everlasting life. And I point out in the Bible, Ezekiel's rising in a chariot of flames is a sign of the fusion. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's your responsibility. That can't happen. That Spirit within you can't do it without your help. You have a great deal of responsibility. So you need to think about that. And that starts them off on a positive line. And most of the time I work with people that way, they turn out to be ardent Urantia readers. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else?
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Well, since here in Europe, we mostly have to do with non-religious people, it's a completely different way of treating these subjects, because you don't talk about God, you don't mention Jesus, because that just scares people away. My personal experience is what usually works after that. It depends on the person, if they're open to it, is just, you know, supporting them in whatever decision they are going to be taking, trying to bring some truth and enlightenment in their situation. But after that, just supporting them and say, hey, no judgment here, do what feels right for you, and giving your opinion, but then telling them you do with it what you want, and just being there for them. And my personal experience is that usually that helps them get some confidence if they've lost it, or even if they're overconfident, just by giving your personal opinion, but saying, hey, I'll support you, whatever you do, and it's your decision. And just being a friend and communicating and trying to bring some truth and other values, higher values, that usually works, especially for people who are not really religious and are not looking at life in that way. Thank you. And
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Samantha. Yes, Joy?
I recently saw something on the news, and maybe you guys saw it too, about a car that had like crashed into a building. There was an older man in the car, and I think he probably had a medical emergency or something. I think it was in Ohio. Anyway, the car like burst into flames. You know, somebody was there with their iPhone videotaping it. And this young man, like in his 30s, after they interviewed him, he rescued the guy. And what he said was, he said, I wasn't going to let that man burn to death in his car. He said, what did it matter to me if I received a few burns? So he actually ran up to this burning car, busted out the window, and you know, he's standing in fire himself and drags the man out. Okay. And he said, yeah, he says, what are a few burns to my body compared to his life? And he just said, I wasn't going to let that man burn to death in that car. And that is respect. You know, I mean, he was really respecting that man in the car. You know, he wasn't just, oh, well, this guy's burning to death. I mean, to me, that's really respect, is, you know, willing to go beyond your own harm in order to help someone else.
Thank you, Joy. I remember a passage in the Urantia Book, I think it's about the fate of Jesus, where the greatest thing a man can give to others is his own life, to save another one's life, to give his life away. That's the greatest service you can give a human or anyone else. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Gilles, you wanted to say something.
I have had more experience with people who have a rather over self-confidence than a lack of self-confidence. But something that comes to my mind is to think about the fact that there is such a gap between the Father, the infinite God, the source of spirit that is infinite and our finite state. So if you compare someone who is more gifted, more talented, more advanced on our planet than someone else, it's a drop of water compared to what's left to do for all of us. So, which means that from this standpoint, we are pretty much on an equal standing. And what matters is not so much where we stand, where we are at, and even with our own individual gifts, but this is where we are heading, and this is the work that we do through experience to bridge the gap. And that's going to take a lot of time. So in other words, is when we don't feel good, or we feel like, okay, well, not so good about it. Well, that's all of that are opportunities to do the will of the Father, because through the experience of improving, we are building something in relationship with God, with us. And I feel like, well, I don't know, this is what I'm thinking when it comes to the lack of self-confidence.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as for my own experience, I've seen that. I know every week I go to this group where I help people that suffer some anxiety or panic attack or different mental ailment. And I see a lot of people that have lost their own confidence, confidence in themselves. And in doing so, I notice that most of the time they lost part of their self-respect. They feel like they're not up to the task of living, because they don't know what's happening to them. They don't know why they have this difficulty in life, going through with all kinds of mental problems. And in trying to restore their self-respect, when I read that part there, it really impressed me. And I've been thinking about it for quite some time. And every time I go to that group, I pray the Father to help me find the right words so that I can help those people restore their self-confidence and self-respect. And I've seen many opportunities, because a little bit like Samantha was saying, in Canada, where I come from, it's not the Bible Belt, to talk about Jesus or to talk about God openly. Even to that group I go to, I'm not allowed to talk about God openly. So we have to be careful. If we talked about Jesus, people will look at us a funny way, and they'll close their mind to whatever we can say. So we have to go through the back door. And I think, by raising their self-respect, it helps them being more open to their own potentials. I think people, when they lose self-respect, they cannot express their full personality, their full potential that personality has embodied within itself. And I've used personality as a point of anchor point. I talk to them about their own personality, that it has all this potential, that they're unique in the universe. And this uniqueness, I explain to them that it's equal with everyone else. Everyone has the same kind of potential, not the same potential, but the same amount of potential within them. So they as great as this next door neighbor. And I make a big deal about the difference that exists between personality and character. So they're not mixing up. And I found out that most people don't even know exactly what personality is all about. They're very confused, because today psychology has taken the role of religion. They put God out. They say, now we're the new priests. We're going to tell you how you work. So I'm using this back door kind of to go back to them and try to restore some self-confidence in them and some self-respect, and bringing them closer to God. And Jesus said at one time, I think, that, bring men closer to God and God closer to man. And so I think for us, the task is try to bring people closer to God. When we live in an area like in Europe, where we can talk openly about God, or where I live in Canada, in part of Canada where we talk about God openly, people will look at us in a funny way. So we have to bring them closer to God. And this is the way I found, by being in service at places where people are suffering. It's easier then to find ways. But if we pray before, we ask for guidance, we always have, ideas that comes to our mind. it's a little bit like we talked last week with Jenny in her own workshop. How do we take the mind of Jesus, you know? What would Jesus do in those kind of situations? What would he do? He would go back to the Father. What is your will, Father? Okay, so in order to proceed with that workshop, I'm going to go on to the next session. So, just a second. Here it is. Okay. Now, this is a point where, as a Urantia Book reader, we might have seen some people that share with us, you know, different experience. And, you know, and I will read the quote here. To be strongly and strangely impressed to do something or to go to a certain place does not necessarily mean that such impulse are the leading of the indwelling spirit. And that quote is taken from paper 159, section 3. So what is exactly, you know, how do we make the difference? How do we discern what's coming from the leading of the indwelling spirit in our own mind? This is a very, you know, like a, how would I say, difficult area. Sometimes even in our own mind, we have those ideas, you know, we're saying, oh, geez, that must be our own adjuster. I've seen people saying, oh, that's my angel doing this, or that's my adjuster. And why is there it's kind of a warning, you know, like be aware that not everything that you think might be coming from the adjuster. So how do we make that difference? So has any one of you have had experience with that and want to share? Okay, Joy, you want to share that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for the most part, while we're here in the material life, we cannot be absolutely 100% sure whether something is from our own mind or from the adjuster. But I think what even Jesus was struggling with that, right? But I think what we can do is search for, you know, the thought or idea or way that is the highest in terms of truth, beauty, goodness, and love. And I'll tell you, there is enough of, you know, enough ideas of truth, beauty, goodness, and love that I'm not living up to, you know, that will keep me busy for the rest of my life. So it's not as if, you know, I don't think it's something where I have to be absolutely 100% sure that something is the adjuster. If I just try to follow the highest that I can come up with, you know, I think that does it. And there have been a couple of times in my life what I would consider supreme decisions where I have felt assurance. But really, it's been only a couple of times, and most of the time it's, you know, my best guess. And so, and I think that the more we do that, the more we practice that, then the better we'll get at it. But meanwhile, that's what I go by.
Thank you, Joy.
If I may, can I?
Yes, yes, Samantha.
I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand mechanically since I'm the host.
All right.
Well, I know it says in the book somewhere, I don't remember where, but it says very clearly, you do well to presume it's your own mind than to ever presume it's the thought adjuster, or more than that. So, you know, always presume it's just you, and that's the best way to go, and that's what I do personally. Even though, like Joy says, I've had moments in my life where I think pretty convinced that they're guiding me, but still I stay humble.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Gilles has
His hand.
Gilles? Gilles, you want to say something?
Yes, sorry, I went, my screen went black for a second. I was going to say something very similar to what Samantha just said. There is indeed a part in the Urantia book that says it's really a matter of personal judgment. Those issues of what comes from the indwelling adjuster versus not from our mind. And in case of doubt, we are better to err on the caution side of not taking it as leading from the spirit, and take it from ourselves, rather than making the mistake of doing the other way around, because the other way around leads to fanaticism and ego boosting and these kind of things, which, by the way, as a little side note, every time I hear someone saying, my thought adjuster told me this and told me that, to me, it's right there a red flag. Because if they are not in the first circle, and if they don't have a discussion the way we do have right now, then, well, sorry, but that's not the way it works. And if they do, chances are they wouldn't boast about it. So it's right there a red flag. What I would add from my personal experience, I have actually struggled with that a lot, because in the process of when you are like really like hard on your knees and saying, okay, well, I want to do the will of the Father, but what is it? What is the will of the Father in my life? And what my experience tells me is the following: is first, it's not so much about what you do, but it's about how you do it first and foremost. So learning, for example, one of my big decisions were early on to never lie, for example. Or when I realized at some point when I grew from being an atheist to being a theist, without being influenced by the Urantia book or any other book or any other religion. So there was a thought process, and in that process, I gained what I call faith, what we call faith, and it's part of the experience, and that's unquestionable. So that's clearly something is going on that has to do with the spirit. But when it comes to more practical aspect of life, what kind of job should I do? What kind of wife should I marry? Who should I marry? Where should I go? Right? So it becomes much more practical. In my personal experience, I haven't had this kind of assurance or this kind of how you call that faith that I was talking about, the certainty of certain aspects that were right. This hasn't come to me in that way, and I think I have come to the conclusion that, or I don't know if the conclusion is the right word, but a better understanding that we are co-creator of our life. And in some of the decisions that I feel like I have to make that are very practical, where should I go now? Where should I live? Should I get married? Should I get divorced? Should I have kids? And all those, what kind of job? All those very practical decisions in life. I felt like I had choices, and that, well, you could go down that route or you could go down that route. It's your choice. It's okay. It's okay either way. It's part of your free will, and it's part of your co-creation. Now, for certain people in certain aspects of their life, there may be some events where there is a stronger lead, and I'm sure that some other people have experienced that. But for me, I have at best very rarely experienced that in those very practical decisions. And in those instances where I felt something more in practical decisions, well, that's very tricky, and I'm still questioning myself about, how much comes from my own mind and subconscious and my own desires versus what comes really from the spiritual leading. And we come back to what Samantha said, and what I also echoed, is it comes back to a matter of personal judgment and also personal decisions in the way you co-create your life. That's the best I have come with. The other thing that I want to say on this is that I'm feeling is as maturity comes, as we gain on maturity, and hopefully I have gained over the years a bit of spiritual maturity. I feel like some of those like if I take like when I was 20 years old, way back then, that I felt nothing when it comes to my practical decisions. And as time has gone, has passed, and as hopefully I've matured, I have started feeling a little bit more. It's not as crisp and clear and as strong as pure faith when it comes to very purely ethical and moral decisions. But I feel that there is something coming a little bit, at least in my personal experience. And I would explain that as, you know, as you grow and you are more coordinated with the Spirit, that coordination comes at a lower level. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm just in the beginning stages of that. So not that much has happened to me.
Thank you, Gilles. Okay, so William.
The question, how do you know it is the lead of your thought adjuster? Maybe to dovetail a bit on Joy, what she said, and also Samantha. In my life, in my experience, I know that when there is a big question or not a big question like an idea, a big idea, I know that it doesn't come from me. And more of this idea that it's like you've got this idea and you need to do something with it. And then it's like scary. You need to act upon something. I didn't want to have that. I didn't want to experience that. But then I could say, yes, it's probably directed from higher than I. But also I know that in doing the will of the Father is when it's truth, beauty, and goodness, that it is involved in it. I know this is the way to act and to be of service and to be also, what's the word? Altruist. This comes from the thought adjuster. But really the question, how do you know it is the lead of your thought adjuster? Well, we don't really know, but we might have we might guess where it comes from. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Jean?
I would like to share with you something that always have caught my attention in the Urantia book. It says in paper 103, section 9, paragraph 10, it says, when reason once recognizes right and wrong, it exhibits wisdom. When wisdom chooses between right and wrong, truth and error, it demonstrates spirit leading. And those are the functions of mind, soul, and spirit, ever closely united and functionally interassociated. Reason deals with factual knowledge, wisdom with philosophy and revelation, faith with living spiritual experience. Through truth, man attains beauty, and by spiritual love ascends to goodness. And this seems to be a definition about what is really spirit leading. Is everything you, Lynn and Joy and Samantha and Gilles have spoken today. And in my personal experience, it's like Lynn said, and also Joy said, is many times I want to know what is the will of the Father. If it's something that I want to do, or maybe do not want to do, but it must to be done, and I know to do the will of the Father is normally the difficult path, something that will cost me effort and will not be easy, and I probably would have to deal with many difficulties and opposition, or is going in the opposite way of the general direction of this world. Is not the easy path. That is something that has happened to me. Is my understanding. Also, it's something that the Urantia Book says is when something comes from the Father, we have a feeling that is something that comes from high. I do not exactly the word to define this, but it's a sensation or feeling that is something that is asking us to do our best effort to do the most ideal, beautiful, and loving thing we can conceive. And another aspect, in my experience, is like Jesus many times prayed and communed with the Father to know his will, and he was not sure about what was the answer to his prayer and his communion with the Father. But he, in his best thinking, in his best evaluation of the situation, it was the most reasonable action that Jesus chose to follow, the path that Jesus chose to follow. And I think one of the most important function of prayer and worship is to have a better attune with the Father, and to do our best effort to know his will. But above all is to have the strength to follow our best possible idea. Like Joy said, we do our best. We think, pray, reflect, and take our path, make our choice with the most our best knowledge, with our best knowledge of truth. The most beautiful thing we can imagine, and with courage. I think this is something that we need also, courage. Thank you very much. Sorry for my difficulties.
It's all right. Well, yes, Ed? You're mute. You're mute.
On paper 34, section 7, the last sentence says, "This is the way." And I'm not going to read the whole paper, of course, but what it's really telling me is when you have these really hard decisions to make, I'm not talking about going to the grocery store or going to meet John or Joe or something like that, but real life decisions of your faith or real important decisions to make. The Spirit of Truth will always speak saying, "This is the way." And I found out this to be very true. Sometimes it doesn't answer you in 2 seconds, 5 seconds, or 1 day or something, but it will answer you. And I've used that many, many times in my life. So anyway, that's my question, my answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else? Yes, Bob and Susan. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, got a question. How many of you know what the term "you be" UBIO means. Can you imagine? UBIO, Urantia Book Introduction Opportunity. How many times have you had the thought as you were with somebody, around somebody, and saw or thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity I can introduce a Urantia book to them, and then backed off? Have you ever had that experience for whatever reason? Well, think about this. They tell us on Urantia, our schooling, we go through a lot of schooling. And then we are tested. Remember how we're tested? Do you remember? We have to teach the people, the individuals, creatures, whatever, coming behind us. That's the way they test us to see if we got the lesson. Hey, could we be getting the same thing here? If we backed off from sharing that with somebody, did we miss an opportunity to measure and show our knowledge? Isn't that what it's all about? Sharing it with others. Most important thing is to talk to other people, trying to find a way. And when I first did it, boy, it was hard for me. But after a while, you couldn't shut me up. I'd see an opportunity all around me. Of course, I'm a little bit glib. That comes from my profession, I guess. Anyway, I want to share that with you. Remember UBIO. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Bob. Susan?
All right. Well, I got a couple of things. When I read this, this passage here, to be strongly and strangely impressed to do something or to go to a certain place. Okay, they put that in there because we all have those inclinations. We all have that experience. Okay, so what's the warning? The warning is don't attribute this to the thought adjuster. And we all know from studying the Urantia book that that is not the realm of the thought adjuster. The thought adjuster's mission is on the spiritual ideals and the cosmic insight from those leadings or those whatever experiences. And so I suspect that there's two things going on here, and that we all have had the experience of having an urge to go someplace, or somebody ends up in front of us, and it's an opportunity, as Bob said, to do something, to serve, to help, to share a teaching, to do whatever. So there's all kinds of other agencies, celestial beings that are working with us to put us in situations where not only we can grow, but those that we're in front of can grow. But the warning is don't attribute this to the thought adjuster. So anyway, that's my thought there. The other was, I just loved, Gillies, what you said in regards to the being three different ways, because to me you presented a marvelous back door, as Gaetan was talking about it, on how to help people with just the concept that those important decisions in our lives, that we have a choice. There are several paths that can be taken in any life choice, and the decision is ours. And people who lack self-respect are in serious situations often don't see that they have a choice, and that they are co-creators in their own life. And what a marvelous teaching to share with people. So thank you very much for that. And then the last thing was, when I look back over my life, had I known, which is one of the marks of becoming mature, is some of that is just having knowledge. not only the knowledge of life experience, but the knowledge that we gain from reading the Urantia book that changes our perspective, or expands our perspective on what life is all about, and the pieces of life, the significance that they have for our spiritual progress, our ability to serve in this life. So, you know, it is important to share the teachings. I'm not so much about sharing the book, but I am about sharing the teachings in the book, because that is what people have the ability to receive and to understand. Not that many people have the ability to read the book itself. I have one more. I just remembered. Bob, I wanted to thank you very much for your idea about the table of contents. I just thought that was marvelous. So I'm seeing here what a benefit this is having to share ideas about how people approach sharing either concepts of the Urantia book or the Urantia book itself. You know, this is, some of this stuff is things that I hadn't thought about before, you know, and it's like, why aren't we talking about this, you know, and every time we get together, you know, what do you know, in conferences or whatever, so that we all have better tools and more tools to use in talking to our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. That resumed quite a bit what's been said here and what I'm thinking also. But Bob wants to add something. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I'm on.
You're on.
Thank you, Susan. I wanted to pass on an idea that might work for you. When I approach somebody and I'm thinking about introducing thoughts in the Urantia book, one of the first things, maybe the second thing I ask them, I might ask them, what's your spiritual background? I'll always ask them, do you have access to the internet? Now, if they say yes, this is what I give them. Okay, let me tell you about a place you might want to explore. It's called truthbook.com. Easy to remember. There is a book that answers all kinds of questions, and you can go to that on the lower right-hand corner of that page and click on read the book. It will not only let you read it, but it will have somebody read it to you. And that is very, very effective. Oh, I hadn't got time to read all that stuff. But if you could click on something and have it read to you, you can learn a lot. And when you hear it orally and see it visually, it reinforces your memory. Anyway, I just thought I'd pass that on to you. Try to use truthbook.com. Go there, explore it, find out what it's all about and how you do it. You can even download it on your cell phone if you want to. But I found that really helps introduce subjects. I'll pick one subject out of the 360 to introduce them, get them to go to it. One of my favorite is paper 49 that tells about life on other planets. Everybody will go for that. Anyway, pass it on, try it out. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Bob. Now, one thing we can be sure of is when the adjuster wants to lead us in one direction, it has to do with our own spiritual progress. It doesn't involve other people. It involves us. And probably when we come to a situation where we're tempted to talk to someone else, maybe the work of the angels, you know, there's many other activity around us. And they work with the thought adjuster, but they always say the thought adjuster is not concerned with our material life, is mostly concerned with our spiritual progress. So probably the danger of allocating to the thought adjuster everything that goes on to our mind is that we would become ego-centered, you know, we would become dogmatic in our views and start telling people maybe that we're better than them and all this. And we've all seen those people, Urantia book reader that said, you know, I met two they thought they were reservists, you know, and others that said they had contact with higher spirits. And this is, every time I heard that was a danger bell ringing in my mind, you know. And these people are most of the time problematic to deal with. So I don't think they're the good way to teach people. So we have to stay humble in our ways of teaching. And I guess if there's this warning there for teachers, is that we don't fall to the trap of believing that everything that comes in our mind that seems to be good, nice, you know, with beauty and truth, comes directly from the thought adjuster. It might be influenced by his presence, but it doesn't exactly is a leading as such. So anyway, I would like to go to further now, where I'll share my screen again. Okay. Now there's this other thing there. I remember that a few years ago, when I was in Chicago, we were looking for a motto, and we came about this: in preaching the gospel of the kingdom, you are simply teaching friendship with God. Now, I remember when this came about, some people said, how can we be friend with God? You know, we don't need to be friend with God. You know, God is God. You know, he doesn't need our friendship. But then here it is. And in the Urantia book, Jesus talks a lot about friendship with God. And this is a phrase, you know, this is a thing that really catch me, because, you know, we don't see God as most people don't see God as a friend. You know, they see God as a supreme being, you know, somebody so far up the chain of command, you know, that, you know, how can he be my friend, you know? And so my question to you is, how do you see this? How do you teach friendship with God? How do you see that teaching friendship with God, with other people? How do you do that in your own life, you know? Is this through a personal relationship with God, that you come to see him as a friend and he can teach this concept to others? So I don't know if you had thought about this, but how do you go about doing that? Anyone? Why would Jesus say to others, teach friendship with God? If he said so, it must be very important. To bring down God to the level of a friend. You know, if you look at the Muslim religion, they see God as a almighty, all there, and he cannot be a friend to you. He cannot be a father to you. He's God. So why did Jesus say to his apostles, teach friendship with God?
Gilles raised his hand.
Yes, Gilles, and then Bob.
Yeah, so it seems to me, I mean, I wasn't brought up in religion, but the real encounter that I've had with the people who come from a church kind of background, it looks like, as you said, Gaetan, one of the big perception is God is the judge. You know, he's going to punish you if you do something bad. So there's, by the way, a lot of fear teaching in that line of thought, which is very unfortunate. And obviously, Jesus taught the other way around. To me, the big thing is in pondering about the purpose of life and the free will and all that, is to come to the realization that our life is ours. I mean, we do whatever we want with it. We have some constraint, obviously. We are in a physical body. We cannot go like fly all over the place, and we are limited in our mind. Fortunately, because otherwise, imagine if with all our monkey thoughts, if there were no limitation, the disaster it could be. But within the constraint and the laws that the environment that we fashion our life the way we want it, and God is not, I'm relating to what I was saying earlier. He's not like a judge of, it doesn't matter what kind of job you do and what kind of musical instrument you play, or all of that are absolutely of no matter. However, we are very ignorant. And And if we try to understand, you know, okay, what's the whole point of that? God does have the answers for us, and it's all about the partnership. So in that partnership, then you try, you know, you have a discussion, you try to get some help, and you try to collaborate. It's like also the concept that we receive something from God, but we also give something to God, which is the work that we do. It's a gift with the decision that we make and what we do in our life. It's something that God cannot do on his own, in the sense that from the perspective of our imperfection and our ignorance. Of course, he does know all of that. He could do everything on his own, and he has done a lot of things. But coming from the perspective of, I don't know, I am ignorant, and I'm going at it anyway, he kind of, so this is our contribution to it. So this is, I think, an important factor is that we are collaborating in our lives with God, and as a result, it's a friendly relationship. And that's the way I see it. And if I may add something,
Gaetan, you're muted.
Yeah, I unmuted.
I'm muted. Sorry, Bob. Jill, you want to say something more?
Yeah, I wanted to add something, is to relate to the experience of being a parent. Jesus was very, very clear at presenting the concept of God as the Father, and I think the Urantia Book says the concept of fatherhood on earth is one of the closest concepts that we can have. And in my personal experience, if I think about the way I deal with my own kids, I certainly don't want my kids to fear me at all. And when I'm dealing with them, in particular when they are, let's say, making decisions that I think are not the best for themselves, then I'm not going after them in an angry way, or and with pleasure, punishing them with pleasure. When I go with them, I try to approach them the best I can from an education perspective. How can I teach those kids what I see that they don't see as yet, because I'm a little bit more ahead in the path than they are. So that's really, it comes from a perspective of love. Even if I end up at some point, let's say, punishing them, which the kids can get, well, you don't love me because, you did that to me, you punish me or whatever. This is not the way it comes from. And I think if I come from the perspective of, I don't know, I am ignorant, and my Father does know, God, the divine spirit in me does know what I don't know, then I try to see the same way, is that it comes from the perspective of teaching me with a loving way, even if sometimes the experiences and the teachings can be painful and not unpleasant, I would say. So that's another way of, by analogy, to if we are capable of loving our kids this way, how much more can God love us in even much greater way?
Mm. Thank you, Gilles. Okay, Bob.
You hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, Gaetan, you got a real good question there. How to be friends with God. Now, there are assumptions one must have in introducing that subject. One, does the person believe in God? That's required, right? Two, does he pray? Praying means talking to God, does it not? So you've got to assume those two things. And then I'm always reminded of, I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, a great TV evangelist perpetrated a great fraud on his audience, a big audience, and pulled in a lot of money as a fraud, saying that God told me to do this, that, and the other, and they backed him with their money. Now he did prison time. I won't go into names or anything, but always since I learned about that, My ears went way up when I heard somebody say, God told me. Now, the question is, how do you know? If you had the experience where you believe God told you something, you might be able to accept that a little bit easier. When we say the adjuster told me, whoa, wait a minute. Can that happen here on earth? We don't know. It tells us, the Urantia book tells us to be very, very cautious about that. So my point is, pardon me, my point is, if you're going to teach God is a friend, you got to find some commonality established first, believing in God and prayer. And then you have to try to establish how the person feels about that if somebody else says they had an experience with God. That's critically important. If it happened to somebody else, could it happen to me? Maybe. If it didn't happen to anybody else, would it ever happen to me? That's a belief position. And you got to work your way through that to approach teaching God is a friend. Now, once in a while, you'll get a little bit of an edge when somebody identifies they think they were influenced by God. If they come from a background and haven't had a lot of problems, you can say, well, partner, that sure sounds like God is your friend. You can reinforce that. But you got to meet those two qualifiers first to teach, in my opinion, to teach God is your friend. Anyway, so be it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else?
I'd like to say something.
Yes, Samantha, then Jamie.
Well, to me, why would he have said that? I think because doing the will of the Father is be you perfect as I am perfect on our level, of course, is you need to know him. He has to be your friend. You need to love him as a friend in order to be able to be like him on our level. And I think personally that is why Jesus said, said that. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Jamie?
I was trying to understand this concept of friendship with God. It was useful to me to think about what means friendship. Because God is our friend, but are we friends of God? That is the question. We need to develop this friendship with God. And looking for concept about friendship, I found this. True friendship involves recognition or familiarity with another's personality. Recognition or familiarity. To know the other person, to be in contact, frequent contact with another's personality. God is another's personality. Also, genuine friendship involves a shared sense of caring and concern, a desire to see one another grow and develop. True friendship involves action, doing something for someone else while expecting nothing in return, sharing thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or negative criticism. Another concept that I found, true friendship involves relationship. Those mutual attributes we mentioned above become the foundation in which recognition transpires into relationship. Another essential element in friendship is trust. In friendship with God, we need to trust in Him. Faithfulness and loyalty are key to true friendship. Real friends encourage one another and forgive one another where there has been an offense. Genuine friendship supports during times of struggle. Friends are dependable. In true friendship, unconditional love develops. I was reading all these concepts that I have found everywhere in the internet, and I think the thought came to my mind, well, this is what we need to develop in our relationship with God. We need to trust in our Father. We need to do the will of our Father. Our Father knows what is the best for us. And if we cultivate this inner relationship with him, knowing the truth about his presence in ourselves, and knowing every teachings that are in the Urantia Book about this relationship, I think this is the concept of friendship. A relationship of confidence, trust, and not fear. A relationship that includes daily contact with our Father. This is also teaching the book. So, to me, this concept of friendship have been very helpful to understand what means this friendship with God. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janie. Lynn, you want to say something?
In the same vein that Jenny is talking, it looks like we think alike. Wasn't your question, how do you teach friendship with God? Was that the question, Gaetan?
Yes, it is. But how do we approach friendship? What is friendship with God?
Yeah, but I like the question, how do you teach friendship with God? And I think that in the world that we're living, of course, if we want to teach friendship with God, we don't need to mention God in our friendship, because like Jenny has mentioned, to make friends, what does it take for someone to be friend with another? You need to take time with that person, to know that person, you know. And when you know those people, then what you do is you want to expand the relationship, and well, you support them, you listen to them, you encourage them, you are kind to them. And this is a way for us to be teaching friendship with God, with other people. You know, in a group of people, or when you are 2 or 3 people, or just 2, how do we teach friendship with God? If, for example, it is with my sister, you know, one of my sister or my 2 sisters, what I do is that I will, comment on dit, accueillir.
Welcome.
I will welcome what they are saying, you know, to be kind to them, to be loving with them, or to them. Teaching friendship with God is that for me. And it doesn't mean that I have to mention God, but I need to be the best of myself, my true self. And this is a way to teach friendship with God, because God is everything. God has all those attributes, all those qualities. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Now, if we look at everything that was said, and in taking in context that when Jesus said that to his apostle, that was in a time when a lot of people believed God was a judging God. And I would say, like Bob, for teaching friendship with God to people openly, I mean, they need at least to believe in God. If they don't believe in God, are you going to teach them friendship with God? But then, if we want to go back to how to do this, a little bit like Jeannie, with everything that she explained and Lynn explained, you cannot teach what you are not. So if you're not friend with God, if you have not developed this relationship with God, how can you teach friendship with God to someone else? So you need to know what is friendship. So whatever Jeannie has explained the description of what is friendship. Well, maybe Jeannie, you need to send that to me. I'll put that on the folder there so people know what friendship is about. Okay, you had your hand. Okay, I'll come back to you, Federico. So for me, what are the qualities of friendship? What are the particularity of friendship? What is a friend to another one? And I think Jeannie's description has answered that. And Lynn has also mentioned the fact that you need to be friends with someone before you can teach friendship with God to someone else. So these are all the thoughts that we need to encompass in our own mind. If we want to teach friendship with God, we need to know what exactly is friendship about. And we have to evolve our own friendship with God. And we need, like Bob said, prayers, meditation, worship, and see God as a friend and not as someone that's judging us. So all these things are necessary, I believe, to teach friendship with God. So I'll leave the word to Federico. You want to say something, Federico?
No, I just did like this to in my head. I didn't even raise my hand.
Okay, good. Thank you. But if you want to say something, go ahead.
I will. I like very much to listen before saying something, you know.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, yes, Susan.
Well, nobody's mentioned that about friendship, that it's like it's a basic human instinct. So it's just fundamental to our nature. We're social creatures. And, you know, it's such an easy avenue to use to teach children when they're, you know, young, you know, to help them to develop a relationship with God or with Jesus, because they're just natural friends. They never met a stranger, and it's fun to watch that in them and try to remember how they view people and try and emulate that in ourselves as adults. Anyway, thanks.
Well, good point, Susan. We didn't talk about children, and this is a place where there's a lot of teaching that can be done. Teaching young kids the friendship with God. You know, when I was young, I remember when we were taught about God, well, mostly about Jesus, you know, my parents would say, well, or I would hear, don't do that because it will displease Jesus, you know. It's like Jesus would, you know, would be crying, you know. That's not exactly a way of teaching friendship with God. You know, you felt guilty. It makes you feel guilty about whatever you do. So teaching friendship with God, God is not judging us. You know, he's probably the last one that will ever judge us. And here we are judging each other, or judging others instead of God, letting him do his job. And he's the one that should judge us, and even him is not judging us. So I think we need to, if we become better teachers of the teachings, because we were talking about sharing the teaching and sharing the Urantia book, and I believe there are people that are good at sharing the books. Others are good at sharing the teaching. You know, the people have certain abilities of talking about the book to others, and they're more inclined to do that, which is all right, because the book needs to get around. But there are others like that prefer to use maybe a gentler way, a more familiar way, is that teaching the teaching, you know, and being that teaching. And depending where we live, sometimes it's more difficult to talk about the book than in other area of the world, depending on the culture in which we are raised. So I think being what we want to teach and learn to be what we want to teach is very important. And I think this is one great quality of a teacher, like Jesus. Jesus was not teaching what he was not. He was teaching exactly what he was. So if we want to teach the truth, beauty, and goodness, we need to embody those values in our own life. And I remember reading about the faith of Jesus, when Jesus wanted to do the will of the Father, how he would do that you would approach God in the highest value. You would get to know God as truth, beauty, and goodness, and express those values in his own life. And this is how he was doing the will of the Father. And he was doing this all the time. And if we read The Faith of Jesus, which is paper 195, I read it not long ago, and it's quite inspiring. And I understood many more things by reading it again. So these are papers that we should read if we want to be able to teach better, and especially teach friendship with God. Okay, we're gonna pass on to the next, we got still more times. Now, I have those quotes here, and I have a few questions about them. So anyone wants to read them, or I can see all of you. I got two screens. So if anyone wants to read those three quotes there, you're welcome, or else I'm going to read them. If you want to read them, just lift your hands. And nobody? Okay, I'm going to read them for you. And that was taken from paper 192, section 4, paragraph 8. And so under the vigorous leadership of Peter, and here the Master ascended to the Father, his well-meaning representative began that subtle process of gradually and certainly changing the religion of Jesus into a new and modified form of religion about Jesus. Excuse me. Religion does not need new leaders. Spiritual men and women who are there to depend solely on Jesus and his incomparable teachings. If Christianity persists in neglecting its spiritual mission while it continues to busy itself with social and material problems, the spiritual renaissance must await the coming of these new teachers of Jesus' religion, who will be exclusively devoted to the spiritual, excuse me, I got a sore throat, fella.
Shall I continue reading then?
Yes, please, do so.
Okay. Let me just put it in. Okay.
Right.
If Christianity persists in neglecting its spiritual mission while it continues to busy itself with social and material problems, the spiritual renaissance must await the coming of these new teachers of Jesus' religion, who will be exclusively devoted to the spiritual regeneration of men. And then will these spirit-born souls quickly supply the leadership and inspiration requisite for social, moral, economic, and political reorganization of the world. To follow Jesus means to personally share his religious faith and to enter into the spirit of the Master's life of unselfish service to men. One of the most important things in human life is to find out what Jesus believed, to discover his ideals, and to strive for the achievement of his exalted life purpose. All of human knowledge, that which is of greatest value, is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it.
Thank you, Samantha. Now, we hear sometimes this concept about the religion of Jesus and the religion about Jesus. And we know that Christianity today has embodied this religion about Jesus. And I was not aware of that till I read the Urantia Book. I never noticed this difference because nobody pointed out to me. So when I read the Urantia Book about, we're making a religion about Jesus instead of, making a religion about the religion of Jesus, of the religion of Jesus, not about the religion, but of the religion of Jesus. That was very new to me. And I've seen that sometimes the Urantia Book reader make a religion about the book, not about the teaching. And they don't embody the teaching. For the book, for them, is something like Jesus. It will change the world. In fact, it's not exactly the book that will change the world. It's the teaching that the book contains that will change the world. And no better ambassador of the book are the one that are embodying those teachings. So we become good teachers of the Urantia Book, especially when we express those teachings in our lives. So, and we've seen people going about Jesus here, Jesus that, you know, there's certain expressions from here in Quebec, we call them the Jesus freak, you know, and if ever we hear someone talking about Jesus, you know, ears, you know, go, wow, you know, who's this person, you know, and it's not a welcome talk where I live. And probably it's not a welcome talk in many places in the world at this time. I think the world is not yet ready for that. And this is why in my first session, I talked about the publication mandate, which it said the book is given to those who are ready for it. Not that we are special, but they are ready because we want to embody those teachings. So that means that a lot of people are not yet ready to read the book. Some of them are, but most people are probably ready to hear the teaching of Jesus. So these are the questions. The first one is, what are the difference between a religion about Jesus and a religion of Jesus? The second is, how a student and teacher can we in our own religious or social community help change this perception? And what are the possible problems focusing in our teaching method on the person of Jesus instead of his teaching? So anyone wants to go ahead with this?
Could you go back to your questions again, Gaetan?
Yes, I will. Just a second. We probably all know people that go around, you know, and I got nothing against it, you know, that I love Jesus, but some people go around, you know, it's a Jesus here, Jesus there, and for some other people it might be offensive to talk that way. They're you know, they're negative about this way of being. Like if I would do that where I live, well, people would put me aside, and they would not talk to me. They'd think I'd be in a cult or something. So I go about making a difference. So I have to know about the difference about the religion about Jesus and the religion of Jesus. What is exactly the religion of Jesus? And if they talk about this in this chapter, it's because this is a challenge for us. We should.
Yes, since nobody is talking. I grew up as an atheist, and I didn't go to church, and it has always been a challenge to when I talk to people who grew up from church to talk about you know, religion from the Christian standpoint, and the main thing is, you know, believe in Jesus and you'll be saved. And I think the religion about Jesus is just having a belief of the name of Jesus and that he was the Son of God. That's it. You're saved and everything's gone, all right. And not only it's sufficient, but it's also necessary. Since someone told me that I was spiritually dead when, in the eyes of God, when I was saying, you know, I have a hard time believing this concept. To me, that's the religion about Jesus. You just believe in Jesus and yeah, you're saved. That's it. That's all you got to do, right? That's the and this to me is has always been a total nonsense. And that's frustrating. I think people, as they evolve, and start asking them some questions, which education helps in the process, probably start getting more and more a lack of ease with that. When talking to some church folks on these topics, they're having a harder and harder time to try to justify it. So you have some that keep on justifying, at all cost, and the others, you can see that they are like kind of evolving, and this is actually why I've observed, at least in my personal experience, that there are some like non-denominational churches that have grown at the expense of the more traditional one. And I think this is part of this phenomenon. So to me, that's a religion about Jesus. You make it about Jesus. He's the Son of God. You believe in, you are saved. That's it. The religion of Jesus is the communion with the Spirit that is within us, that also surrounds us, and all the spiritual influences that we have, as demonstrated in the spiritual life of Jesus. Not in the work that he did, like as a carpenter, but in the way he did everything he did, and in the way he integrated and he shared his life with the divine spirit in him to inspire him. And that's what we need. What we need is, I think, when they're talking about, when I talk about the spiritual leaders, is first and foremost people who live their life in this way, and then other things will come out of it, depending upon characters and things like that. But that's the most important thing, and the most important thing is not so much the teaching. You can talk about all day long about being honest and being spiritual and being nice and being loving and blah 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 blah. To me, you can tell me I love you all day long. I don't give a damn about it, if I may say it this way. Show me the love, the true love. Be love, and then we can talk about it. And I think that's what matters. It's not the Urantia book. It's not the teaching. Is raising ourselves in communion with the Spirit, so that we can, one step at a time, in every simple activities in life, in every single encounters, in every single relationship, we grow in terms of being more and more in communion, more and more in harmony, and more representing or exercising or pouring out what the Spirit truly is in practical way. And I think that's the part of the growth. There are, and looking back, I can observe that in my life. They are talking, for example, in the book about the transformation of character, or something along those lines. I can give like a very, very some practical example. Like, for example, what happened to me yesterday. Yesterday, I realized that my bank account was hacked. And right now I'm out like over $20,000 just from my credit card and being. So let me tell you, 10 years ago it would have happened. I don't know how many walls would have resisted my unhappiness about it. And well, it sucks. Yes, it does suck. But I'm not. I would have to put up with a lot of crap and a lot of administrative work and all that. Maybe I would have lost. I don't know if I'm going to recover part of the money, all the money, none of the money. I hope some. But the point is that in such kind of, if you look back on such painful experiences like that you have in life, if you look back the way you could have or you would have behaved, way back then, the way you behave now, and hopefully if you project forward the way you will behave in the future, then you see a progression. And the spirit transformation is that, in very practical terms, is that. It's not about telling, well, Jesus loves you. Yes, he does, but that's certainly a fact. But it's about living it and integrating it in your own life to the point that it transforms everything, the way your perspective on life and every single experience that you have, including this just one I just related because it's very fresh, but everything. And this is as Lynn was saying earlier when talking about friendship, it's not about talking about friendship. It's about being a friend. Just be. I was reading like not so long ago, like a few days ago, one of those quotes in Urantia Book. I forgot where it comes from, but something like, it's not so much about what you do, but who you are. It's about to be, not to do, first and foremost. So let's be love. Let's be friend. Let's seek the religion, and let's with our own character, our own gifts and endowments. Let's take its expression the way it does naturally. But first and foremost, be inspired by the Spirit. Let's be. Talk less, be more. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilles. Thank you. A lot of things to think about. Anyone else wants to have a go at this?
Hello. I'd like to just say thank you and introduce myself before I have to go.
Yes, John. Yes, we can.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. I'm glad to be a part of this. I'm a longtime reader living in California, USA, and have many thoughts about this. But as I said, I do have to go, and so I didn't want to just drop off without saying hello. But a lot of great questions today, and the question about the religion of Jesus as opposed to the one about him is pretty central, I think, because as we have all recognized, sometimes dropping the name doesn't really work with a lot of people nowadays, and so we have to move past that. But even the people who are hooked into the religion about Jesus will listen to new teachings that are centered on the religion of Jesus. And I really do think it goes to friendship with God. And I loved what Jeannie said, and some of the others also. It's the qualities of friendship are what we need as teachers. Before we go out, we have to be friends with God ourselves. And I think trust is, you don't just trust in God, you have to trust God with something. And you have to trust him with your problems sometimes, and you have to trust him with those kind of difficulties that keep popping up when we get angry or we get impatient, and those kind of things. I've been working on that a lot lately. I look forward to joining you again next week if I can. But again, thanks for providing this forum, and hope to be speaking again and listening to you all later. Okay?
Thank you very much, John. Your word greatly appreciated. We hope you will join us again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
Anyone else wants to express their idea about religion of Jesus and religion about Jesus? Yes, Susan?
I don't know how well this will go, but Ed and I were having a discussion this morning about, I think it was more about spiritual unity. And I'm seeing I got two things going on in my head right now. One would be that, if we're talking to someone that does believe in some religion of some kind, and it's normally going to come around to at some point, well, I don't believe that, that's not what it says in the Bible, or this or that, and my response was, well, we're not going to talk, we're not talking about beliefs here. We're talking about, what is your experience with God? What have been some of your experiences with Jesus in your life? And keep bringing it back to the experiential religion, and instead of what we're thinking. And then that led me, that even we as Urantia Book readers are also guilty. It's so easy for us to get caught up in what we believe. and forget to, and it puts up walls for us with other religions, with other members of our community, because we have different thoughts and beliefs about things, and how divisive those thoughts, beliefs, creeds, judgments are everywhere. And to come back to experience disintegrates those walls, because what wall can you build when you're talking about your own personal experience, and how edifying it is to hear others' personal experiences. So just in a nutshell, to me, that's the difference between the religion about Jesus and the religion of Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Very well said. Yes, Lynn. Unmute.
Sometimes when we want to talk about spiritual things to other, it's like we want to convey them to the Urantia Book. We don't need to knock them with the book. I really like what you have said, Susan, that the experience talks by itself, because it is to be and to do what Jill said before. Just to embody the fruits of the Spirit, or become the fruits of the Spirit, the way that Jesus was doing it and living his life, and to show love, to be kind, to be respectful. Well, this is the religion of Jesus, and we don't need. And like Gaetan was saying, we cannot here in Quebec talk about Jesus like this, or mention his name. Although when we know that there are believers around the table, we can say Jesus or God, but in the large public, no way. We're going to be like, not shoot at, but like looked at, who are they? So, of course, to be kind, to be respectful with people, to be loving, to be welcoming them, well, this is what people need. This is really what people are looking for, and they are so, because when you are being kind to someone, or you say hello and put a nice smile on your face, and they look at you like, oh, hello. It's like this changed really the attitude of people, and this is Jesus' religion to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Anyone else? I guess it's quite a hard question, because it's hard for people to answer the question adequately. Everything that was said so far is always a good answer. There's no bad answer. And I think experience has a lot of things to do with it. Whenever we share our own life with others, our spiritual life with others, by our own service to others, well, we are the religion of Jesus. We embody that religion of Jesus. What did Jesus do? Always be good to others, always be patient with others, always be friend with others. So we need to embody that religion before we talk about it. We cannot talk about something we're not, or else people will say we're hypocrites, And we have this saying in Quebec, about the priests, They used to say about the priests, oh, they tell us what to do, but they're not doing what they say to do, what they tell us to do. So there was something completely different than what they told the people following them to do. So we need to embody, and people have come to realization that, today they have more discernment concerning religion. So if you're not exactly what you preach to do, well, they won't listen to you. But people don't need to be preached at. They need to see that truth, that living truth around them. And this is quite a challenge for us, because it needs that we need to change ourselves. And to embody those values, it takes time. It takes a lot of prayer, meditation, worship. We need to be in close relationship with God. And what did Jesus teach? Friendship with God, but also God as a father, as a loving father, that we're son of God, and also that we are all brothers. So do we, exactly when we look at the world out there, do we see everybody as a sister and brother? Or do we see them as Muslim, as black, as white, as yellow, or as different types of people? What do we see when we look at them? Did Jesus go around and look at people and judge them by their class, by their colors, or by their religion? No. For him, they were all his brother and sister. He was our brother, in fact. So thinking about the religion of Jesus is completely something different than talking about Jesus. Of course, among people that believe in Jesus, they can talk about him, about his personality. But a lot of people see Jesus, like the Urantia Book says, some people saw Jesus as completely human, without any divine, characteristic in him. And some others saw him as completely divine. So how can you emulate something or someone that is divine? And for us is the human Jesus. So what did the human Jesus embody? And this is what we can look at. How was he in his own life? And this is what the Urantia Book says. To learn about the faith of Jesus, to learn who he was, what he believed in, and to be that, what he believed in, to be what he was. Not exactly how he was, to do exactly what he was doing. I don't think we can ever achieve what he did. But at least we can absorb some of his quality. In reading the chapter about the faith of Jesus, they tell a lot about, who he was, but they tell us also that when he was, saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. In fact, he was exerting himself to be that. He was not requiring of everyone. He knew how weak we are. So we need to be forgiving on ourselves. We're not yet there. Like Joy said last week, if I'd be Jesus when he was 10 years old, I'd be glad, And she's not the only one thinking like this. When I think about his life, how he was, geez, I wish I'd be there, when he was 15, even when he was kids, you would have those thoughts, geez, how good would that be if everyone would be like him? But we're not like him. We're not him. Each one of us needs to be our own self and express those teachings. So anyone wants to share something before we have still 5 minutes to go? Yes, Ed. Okay,
I just wanted to, am I up?
Okay, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah,
and
I
then
just a short thing. I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention one situation. And generally speaking, in most of the study groups I've been involved in the last 40 years, it's really hard to get the study group to work on situations where we are acquiring skills to work with the public. I don't know why this is, and I wish I did know that maybe it's my fault or the study group's fault, but I notice this in other study groups too. They just end up studying year after year after year, and we don't seem to get out there in the public with these studies. So that's my question to the group here. What can we do? Thank you.
That was one of my questions that we have not yet explored about what can we do in study groups to do these things, to engage ourselves in service. And maybe in another session, we'll explore this, Ed. Thank you for sharing that.
I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Samantha.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the question, the difference between religion about Jesus and his teachings. I think I often say this, is that most people tend to, out of, by lack of a better word, laziness and easiness, sometimes tend to be in the traditional religions, because the difference is, like Gilles said, you know, you do your Hail Marys or things like that, and you're fine. There's less responsibility. Whereas with the Urantia Book, it takes effort. It takes work on ourselves, like you said, Gaetan, where, you know, we have periods when we think we're there, and then things happen in life, and it continues, and it's work, and that's fine. And that is the only way to motivate all the others in the end, when we do attain a certain level of living the teachings, to motivate the others to want to do the work. But I do think that that is the big difference, because most of us are lazy. That's just human, you know, behavior. And because I think a lot of people would then have to say, oh, my life is not as good as I want it to be, but actually that's my own fault, which is quite depressing. So I understand that a lot of people are not ready to do that yet. But that's also our paradox and our dilemma. On one hand, we're willing to do the work, but it's not that easy. And we need to attain a certain level of living the teachings and having faith in order to be able to inspire others. So yeah, for me that's different, but I also find it very interesting, because we also as human beings, even as Urantia Book leaders, are struggling with this, because it is not easy. And then trying to motivate others just by living it is a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. And Lynn, the last word.
Wow, the last word. Samantha, thank you so much. And what I want to just add to Samantha, what she just said, so many times I ask myself, what does it really mean? Sincerity, more sincerity, and much more sincerity. That's it.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'll turn that back to Jeannie.
Just a few words about sincerity. In my view, it's sincerity before God, to God. Our sincerity in our search for His will, our search for divine realities, our identification with the Spirit, our really search for spiritual transformation. I think our sincerity, even if you have not great intellectual capacities, or if you are humble, that sincerity is what allows the Father to do the work in ourselves. Because this means that the doors of our soul are fully open to the Father, and when we are sincerely consecrated to do His will, it is Him who do the work in ourselves. It's this spiritual transformation. It is not something merely intellectual, merely in the human level. Of course, we need to do our part, and that in that part, sincerity is essential, because our Father knows what we think, knows exactly what our intentions are. That is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeannie. And true, sincerity is a key. And not many places in the Urantia Book they say about keys, you know, and they say sincerity is a key to progress. So we need to elaborate on sincerity, what exactly sincerity means. And there's a story about sincerity that I like to tell sometime to this group that I go to. You know, it's like this young man that tells this young woman, oh, I love you so much, you know, I would cross mountain and lake and ocean just to meet you, but tonight it's raining outside, I can't go and see you. So he was not exactly sincere, you know. So sometimes in approaching God, you know, if we make condition, you know, God has given Himself totally to us. What are we giving to Him? Are we giving totally to Him? Are we sincere really? So when we want to approach this as a teacher, we want to become teacher of his teaching, of the teaching of Jesus. So are we really sincere? And I think sometimes as Urantia Book reader, we lack sincerity in our desire to become those teachers that will transform the world. Maybe it's because the responsibility scares us. Because when we see, I remember when I read the book, you know, that after I finished my first reading, the responsibility that this truth put on me scares me. It scared me at the time. And it took me a good 3-4 years before of changes within myself before I accepted those responsibility. And with responsibility comes change. So this is why I always say we need to embody those change. What we want this world to become, we need to be those change in ourselves. So anyway, we're at the end of our session. Thank you very much for everything that you have shared. And I wish we'd had more time, and I believe there's many more things we could share about this. But remember what was said. And as soon as those recordings are available, you can go back to them. So I'll leave the word back to Jeannie if you want to say something, Jeannie, before we leave. Thank you all.
I want to say thank you, Gaetan. Thank you for these beautiful lessons. Thank you, everyone, for everything you have shared. I have learned so much, and I am so grateful for being able to know you and to be with you in this study. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. God bless you. See you soon next Saturday.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Sam.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bob. Thanks, Federico.